Mr. Stanley Wang is a Taiwanese Australian who has spent the bulk of his childhood and career in Melbourne, Australia. He graduated from the University of Melbourne with a double degree in Bachelor of Arts, Linguistics and Japanese, and Bachelor of Commerce, Economics, before joining Teach for Australia as a fellow in a secondary school in suburban Melbourne. In 2015, Stanley was offered an opportunity to lead the Australia's largest school-based language department at Haileybury College, comprising more than 80 teachers in 8 different languages offered across the school's 6 campuses and 12 partner school sites across Asia Pacific. In 2018, Stanley joined Teach for Taiwan as the Chief Strategy Officer after having 5 years of engagement with the organization on a voluntary basis and delivering the Teaching as Leadership training to the initial 2 cohorts of fellows. Since July 2019, he has moved into the role of Chief Executive Officer at Teach for Taiwan. Again, I am very proud to present to you our distinguished speaker, Mr. Stanley Wang. Thank you.
Thank you, Fides, for the introduction, and good afternoon to our audience. So today I'd like to share with you basically one concept. As I'm aware that this series of lightning talks and Pedagogy is about hearing something new, and so my one kind of novel idea is about viewing teaching as leadership. So it's not quite a talk about educational leadership or school leadership, but it's about viewing that act and the practice of teaching that we all love as a form of leadership. And so my talk will be in 2 parts today. One is an introduction to Teach for Taiwan and what we do, because that will give you a context for why we view teaching as a form of leadership. And then the second part will be the core spirit, really, of what our program is. And so to begin, I'd like to give you a quick introduction to Teach for Taiwan. And to do that, I'd like to use a bilingual video that we have recently put together to help put some, to give you some context for what is the educational problem that Teach for Taiwan is aiming to tackle in Taiwan. So let me play the video.
这是一道数学题目，小时候我们都回答过类似的题目。在台湾，同样的题目，小安在小学2年级已经驾轻就熟，而康康到了小学毕业仍然看不懂题目。这是所谓教育不平等的表象。在国际学生能力评比上，媒体经常表扬台湾在学科表现上领先其他国家，但研究同时显示，台湾学生的学历表现与家庭社经地位呈现高度正相关。教育的机会受到出身影响，许多孩子难以透过教育脱离弱势的循环，学习得不到成就感，也得不到身旁大人的肯定。许多孩子渐渐失去学习的动机与自信，进而放弃人生的选择权。更不幸的孩子甚至就此走入难以回头的歧路。当社会案件发生时，有人会跳出来说是加害者从小没学好，也有人说是他的父母师长从小没教好。但是事情真的这么单纯吗？如果我们更深入地关心这些有问题的孩子，往往会发现其实他们只是被问题环绕的孩子。以康康为例，他总是不交数学作业，让老师很伤脑筋。事实上，康康成长的社区产业凋零，父母为了贴补家用，长期在外地工作，导致康康没有人可以询问功课与陪伴。也因为康康不交作业，老师经常在课堂上责骂他。或许有人会说老师应该更有耐心，但鲜少人会注意，老师除了教学进度的压力之外，因为学校人手不足，还要兼任校务行政，永远忙不过来。种种细微的难题其实彼此环环相扣，逐渐累积成庞大的系统性问题，而这样的问题直接影响了孩子的学习品质与未来的选择权。 TFT 为台湾而教的成立，是为了改善台湾教育不平等的问题。我们相信，要解决系统性的问题，就要以系统化的方式回应。然而，无论是什么解方，都需要人的投入才能实现。因此 ，TFT 致力于打造一个人才培育基地，每年招募跨领域青年到有需求的教育现场，在2年间与孩子共同建立正向学习经验，同时在高挑战的情境中培养突破自我、影响他人、达成目标的领导力。长远而言 ，TFT 相信这些人才将能带着第一线的经验，到多元领域串联彼此的影响力，为教育的改变凝聚更大的动能。有人持续在教育现场耕耘，并带动学校转型；有人串联社区营造的力量；有人参与教育政策的倡议；有人跳脱现有框架，带动社会创新。从孩子、学校、社区到社会，用集体的力量一起为台湾而教。愿有一天，台湾所有的孩子，不论出身，都能拥有优质的教育和自我发展的机会。
So I hope the video has given you some background to I guess, our vision, which really is that one day all children in Taiwan, regardless of their background, will have access to quality education and opportunities to realize their full potential. We're really a non-profit organization that has been set up to tackle the problem of educational inequity. We see it as more of a systemic social problem. So right at the heart of this problem is our students, who are our beneficiaries. And like the video said, once you start to get to know them as individuals, you start to see that they're really surrounded by problems rather than being the problems themselves. And so if we take that concept into consideration, we realize that educational inequity is not one problem. It's actually a subset of many problems that are surrounding the students. So most immediately, students spend most time at school. And so the schools also have these issues presented here. Schools often are at the heart of the communities, especially in rural villages and townships. And so the community also brings in challenges to the students. And lastly, at a societal level, whether that means educational policy, whether that means the value the society places on the teaching profession, we also see that playing a big influencer, well, it's a big influential role on students' ultimate outcomes. Now, in the context of Taiwan, hardware, fortunately, is not an issue. And so I'd like to share with you, when we talk about rural education and educational disadvantage in Taiwan, often it's a bit hidden from the fact that we have great infrastructure, we have great technologies already in the classroom. But what we're really missing, as Teach for Taiwan believes, is the talent. And so, as you can see from some of the photos we have taken at our partner schools here and with our teachers, the teachers we have sent to these schools, they don't lack sometimes the equipment like what people typically think. They have really good school buildings. But what they really lack is that significant other who can be there with them as they grow up, who can really influence like another parent, but one, in a school context. And so our mission is really about cultivating agents of change. So we recruit high talents and we send them to areas of need. So we are cultivating agents of change, coupling them with high need context so they can work together to find an innovative solution to this kind of inequity that they face. And once they finish this program, which is 2 years, they become an alum of Teach for Taiwan. And we're estimating that within the next few years, we will soon reach 500 Teach for Taiwan alum who have been serving in the front line for at least 2 years. And together with what they see and what they experience, which is so impactful for many of these young people we recruit, we hope that they can inspire systemic change. And so our theory of change really is that what makes the best teachers are those with leadership potentials. And we'll talk a lot more about that. during their time, during their 2-year fellowship, we place them in the classroom so they can accumulate frontline experiences very quickly. However, they are still unlicensed. And so during this time, we offer up to 500 hours of training, not in that traditional teacher training format. And this is the part I will be sharing more about today, in the spirit of what we call teaching as leadership. Then during their 2 years, we start to challenge them, give them frameworks to see what is impacting the students' academic outcomes in their classroom. And as many of our fellows then find, it's often not things that are happening inside the classroom that's affecting them. It's the school level, it's what's outside of the classroom that often is hindering the progress. And so we challenge them to think about something they can do to lead change outside of the classroom. And then, of course, like I said before, we're excited to have, up to 500 alumni who can capitalize on this frontline experience to then really think about collectively what is it that they can do together to continue contributing to the cause of educational inequity. And so I also thought in today's PowerPoint, I'll share with you, hopefully in a more visual way, as a bit of a making up for the kind of international exchange that's had to happen at the moment during the pandemic. So I have a few photos here from the schools that we work with and our teachers and our students. So at the moment, they roughly teach 16 to 20 periods a week. They have a leadership coach and over 50 online coaches who volunteer their time to support our teachers. And so here is an example of their notes on their lesson planning and getting feedback from different mentors. They have 500 hours of training. And then we always say, look, you have over 1,000 days of frontline experience, and it is really that the experience in itself that inspires future change. What we have found so far in our 6 years of working in Taiwan is that the alumni community, after the 2 years, they tend to go into one of these 5 pathways, both because they really see the need for policy change, for example, or that they start to see actually a principle of a rural school can really have an impact, not just on the school, but the whole community. So some of them will go down school leadership route. Some people choose to stay in teaching, some people start to go into community development, and some people often join other NGOs or even do their own startup if they have an idea that they really see as an innovative solution for education. And so right now, after we have 4 cohorts that have officially finished, and so there are 91 of them, and this is kind of like their spread. For the other 76 that are currently serving, either in their first year or second year, they serve around these regions in Taiwan. And if you have a chance to visit, or if you know about Taiwan, we're highly mountainous. And so you can see in this graph, if you match it against something like Google Maps, you will see that wherever there is these pink areas, it is often farmlands where we have the most agriculture, or it's extremely high mountains. And so for those who don't know, on this very small island there are over 200 mountains that are above 3,000 meters. And so you can imagine in some of the mountainous villages, access is quite a challenge. And of course, we really value, as part of this process, global connections. And so, as you can see in the first photos, I've had an opportunity actually to visit Teach for the Philippines about 2 years ago. And as well as on the photo on the right, really mingling with other like-minded individuals who are also on this journey to tackle educational inequity in their own country. And so we often have fellow study trips taking our teachers to see how people in another country tackles this problem. We also have staff exchange. So a lot of the time the staff will be more functional based. And so if we have the opportunity to interact with someone in another country who does the same job, often we learn a lot. And lastly, there is also Teach for All, which is like the global network that often provide some support to us. So here are more photos really of our global exchanges with India on the top left when they came to visit us. Some of our alumni have then actually joined networks of different Teach for alumni in New Zealand to really work on Indigenous perspectives in curriculum. We also have on the bottom left an opportunity to participate with, actually on the right, in that photo, our alumni is the third one and the fourth one. So the one on the right is from the Philippines, to really talk about how is it that we can share each other's experiences and what are the similarities between different Asia Pacific nations when it comes to education. And the last little picture I'd like to share is, if it wasn't for the pandemic, at the moment, we would really welcome international educators to visit us. We have a program here you will see on our official website on the homepage, where we offer an opportunity for anyone visiting Taiwan to meet some of our teachers and to work with our schools. We hoped that people can see it as an adjunct to their holidays in Taiwan. And so even if it's an extra day or two, we'd really appreciate bringing in different stimuli to our teachers. Okay, so enough about Teach for Taiwan. Let me get to the real topic, is teaching as leadership. So you probably saw in our theory of change that this word, teaching as leadership, was mentioned in this second stage where we talk about the kind of training we offer to teachers. So what does that mean? The quick answer is we believe that a teacher is a leader in the classroom. And I used to give this really blunt version of my understanding when I was just a beginning teacher. I was placed in a school to become the classroom teacher for year 9. And in Australia, that means 15-year-olds. And it's the year that most beginning teachers don't want. It's seen as the peak of the teenager and the changing in self, the change physically, the change spiritually, and the change in your identity. So often seen as the most immature bunch of people to teach. And so I often make this joke. I say, look, I really like the training I received in teaching as leadership, because if you can lead a bunch of very immature teenagers towards greater academic outcomes, I'm sure you'll be able to lead a bunch of mature adults in the future towards greater systemic change. Now, that was the innocent me, because later on, going into school management and now leading a non-profit organization, I have obviously learned that leading a group of mature adults are just as hard. It has its nuances that I didn't see back then when I was very young and a passionate classroom-based teacher. But certainly, reflecting on my own leadership now, I see that my classroom teaching experience has inspired me a lot. It has really framed the way I look at leadership. And so, you know, often when we think about leadership teaching, we see it as two different concepts. If we do that, I think even then we would see that there is a strong overlap in the middle anyway. I quote here a few very interesting articles, you know, with the web addresses here if you are interested in reading more, is that you often see these two things being quoted together as if there's a huge area of transferability between leadership and teaching. And so a great article on the left says 9 reasons great teachers make great leaders. And then on the other side, from the Harvard Business Review, the best leaders are the greatest teachers. And if you read into the content, you will see that, yeah, actually, what I do every day in the classroom is really what I expect a good boss at work to do. You know, it's really what I expect a good leader of my country would do. And so even when you treat them as two different things, you start to really see, wow, I am that person in my classroom, you know. And these days in Taiwan, because we have this big problem of declining birth rate, that feeling is less intense. You know, sometimes I walk into some of the classrooms, I only see 5 children, 6 children now. But I know from my visit to the Philippines, you know, every time I walk into a classroom, it's always 40, 50. And so it's no doubt that what you do and every moment of it is a way of practicing leadership. And so if I think about traditionally, how do we train teachers? I'm going to broadly term that as pedagogy. You start to see all these sub-disciplines, right? Before a teacher going to the classroom, they need to know how to plan a lesson, how to design a curriculum. They need to have some PCK. They need to know how to design assessment for or as or off learning. They need to know how to manage the classroom, differentiate, work with special needs. And you start to see this fragmented thing as if there are just so many things we need to prepare them for that these guys should never be entering the classroom until they're all ready. But in reality, we know that's not true. You know, we know that, yes, these are all challenges that as professionals, we are growing every day to become more capable in dealing with. But there is absolutely no way we can be an expert in all of these topics before we step inside the classroom. So then when I try and remind myself, wait a second, we are a non-profit that wants to tackle a social problem, right? We never said we are the best teacher training institute in Taiwan. We are on a different mission, right? Our mission is to cultivate the next generation of leaders via the classroom. And so we want to see the classroom as a training ground for leadership. So when I apply this kind of lens to how I view pedagogy, I start to see there is a change. I need to ask myself, what makes a great leader? And then you start to see this thing. Everything I have listed above just then, if we at the core ask ourselves, what makes a good lesson? Or what makes a good curriculum? Or what makes a good assessment? You start to realize actually you are using leadership skills like systemic thinking. You are learning to plan ahead. Sometimes you're learning to plan backwards from a goal, and you're learning about how to execute and how to make sure things are on track. When we talk about classroom management, it's almost sometimes people treat it like it's a unique art in itself. You know, at this moment, if you say this, you will get a magic result of this. But really, I mean, at home, when you're talking to your own children, or when you are outside waiting for a bus and no one's lining up, and you want someone to follow your instructions, I mean, you are constantly communicating and coordinating, right? And you judge whether it's the right time to say something based on how much trust you have built with the person. And so when you kind of investigate what's in the common ground between all of these sub-pedagogical themes, we have, at least from our experience in Taiwan, boiled it down to 6 skills: systemic thinking, planning and execution, building trust, communicate and coordinate, to be self-aware, and adaptivity and a growth mindset. So these 6 areas are what we think all teachers, especially beginning teachers, actually need to build very quickly in order to use their classroom experience as a training ground for leadership. And so if we take this typical kind of scene of a teacher working with a bunch of children, sure, there is a lot of specialist knowledge involved, right? But at the same time, when you then think about what happens if we view them differently, if we view them not as teachers, but as leaders, what we need to give them and empower them with will be different. And so here I'm really talking, and I will substitute this description now with the word lens. We're really talking about teacher training through a leadership lens. And so in our framework at Teach for Taiwan, we then realized that what these 6 skills really are the crux of it is that we need to make sure teachers know how to achieve goals, how to set goals, achieve goals. They need to know how to influence others and take them along on a journey. And they need to know how to make self-breakthroughs, so they're constantly improving. And that is what we call teaching as leadership. It's the process of being able to lead change, lead others, and lead self. Not as 3 separate skills, but all at the same time. And I'd like to give you an example of how that works. So, firstly, I love this quote because it really matches in the philosophy of how we train teachers at Teach for Taiwan. So the concept of leading and teaching are so intertwined that every leader is a teacher and every teacher is a leader. So here is an Australian classroom, very much like the one I had in my first year of teaching. And I'll roughly describe to you what the kind of class I met. So I had a class called 9A. They were 15-year-olds. I had 25 students, 5 deaf, 2 legally blind, 2 non-English speaking, recent arrivals from Afghanistan, and 5 from very low socioeconomic background. Often they don't come to school with breakfast, there's domestic violence issues at home, and some also move from home to home. One that had recently been transferred from a juvenile center, but of course it wasn't documented, so I didn't know at the start. And then I had 2 extremely bright students who were way above year 9 level in their literacy, but I also had 12 extremely below the required literacy level, roughly at grade 3 and 4. And so this class, I remember vividly in my memories, because it was this kind of challenging diversity that I think really made me realize that I wasn't prepared well enough as a specialist teacher to deal with all of the challenges in my classroom. But I was trained very well from a leadership mindset to know what I might do with them in order to make sure they're all leaving my class with an improvement in their academic outcomes. And so let me share with you a few little stories that I'm sure will resonate with your classrooms too. And so in that first day, when we haven't got to know each other, I realized that actually, discipline in the classroom generally about how you participate just wasn't taken for granted. There were kids throwing things at each other, or sometimes trying to aim at the rubbish bin, but very far away. There were people talking when I'm talking. There were people eating in the classroom. So I started to create a lot of rules about know this, know that, know this, to a point that I couldn't police it anymore. There were just so many rules that I have created that I started to realize a few days later that some I actually didn't really care about. I started to really question myself. Am I asking them not to throw things because I am concerned about their safety? Or is it because I just don't think it's the right thing to do? Because I come from, let's say, a more middle class background where I have certain expectations about how classrooms should work. And I start to question that. Why is it that kids can't be throwing things, or why kids can't be eating? For the child that never comes to school with breakfast, if sometimes he can grab a quick bite from a friend who's able to offer him some food, would I want him to be very hungry in my class? So where is this rule a school rule, or is it my rule? And if it's my rule, is it reflecting my values? And so I think even the simplest response at the start as a beginning teacher, where you're just saying no to everything, it really pushes you to, in a way that we frame as leading self. When we say leading self, we mean really understanding, being self-aware about your actions in the classroom and what that might be reflecting. And then thinking about how that interacts with your effort to take these kids along on a journey to achieve some outcomes. So for example, at one stage, there was the one child from juvenile center. I had no idea that his literacy level was so low. And so I thought he was just lazy. So I kept him in at lunch and I said, you finish this sentence or you're not leaving the classroom. And after the second day, I got punched out by him because it was just way too hard for him and I had no idea. And I started to wonder, actually, for this child now, if I think from his perspective, what does he need the most? If I knew he was from this kind of background, maybe what was more important is I keep him in at lunch, not to finish this sentence, but to really build that trust relationship with him. And of course, I think it comes down to both what you do and what you say. And so, for example, the first time I set a piece of homework and the submission rate was, 40, 50%, some did, handed in, some didn't, I start to realize I respond to different child differently. Some of them I might be saying, how come? Some I might be saying, what's wrong? Or some of them I'll be like, again? Forget it. And I realized that all these little responses were giving off messages and were reflecting of my own leadership much more than actually worrying about the homework submission. My attitude towards the homework submission really reflected much more about who I am how I wanted to lead this team towards the goal. So if I am very impatient and I'm constantly saying things like, forget it, you're always doing this, then how is that supposed to build trust? And how is that supposed to help the child move forward? I probably should be saying to some where I can really empathize with their situation, look, don't stress about it. I know you're going through a difficult time. Why don't we set a different due date for you? And I think all of those little strategies about what you can say, what you should say, how you can manipulate the situation is the art of teaching. And those things, there's no standard formula. So it was really important one day when my mentor said to me, and she was obviously a very well-experienced teacher, that no matter how experienced you are, you can never solve and be prepared enough to solve every problem. You can only prepare yourself to be a leader in the classroom. And I started to realize, wow, I'm not that behind compared to others who have been through formal training. It's not the case that I have to sit through 4 years of lectures on what lines you should be using in response to non-submission of homework. It really is much more about leading yourself, others, and goals. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't believe there are so many additional areas in pedagogy that is worth investigating. But I teach for Taiwan because our participants only have the 2 years in their leadership training. We see them as more like an extension. These areas that are very popular now, like SEL, like AI, AR, VR, STEAM, these kind of things, for those who are interested in continuing their journey as a frontline teacher and educator, of course, it's super important. However, they don't quite, for me, when I view teaching as a form of leadership and I see it through the lens of leading self, others, and change, I see this as, look, if I need this now in order to operate better as a leader, then I can make the effort and to make some breakthrough and go and learn these things myself. That's how I keep myself professionally engaged in professional development all the time. So back to, I guess, the theory of change. I'm not promoting necessarily that this is the only way to view teacher training. I'm not devaluing that there are so many specialist topics that are really worthwhile mastering by all teachers. However, like I said at the start today, I am on a different journey. We are a non-profit organization trying to tackle the big social problem. And in our theory of change, we believe that agents of change is the core. So having talent in this who are engaged in this topic is the core to our solution. And that's why for us, classroom is both an opportunity to have positive impact on the children, but as well as a training ground for leadership. And that's why we really see teaching as a form of leadership. And so when you start to see it through the lens of leadership, you start to see that core leadership competences and the pedagogical competencies really are intertwined, right? And so there is a constant cycle of leading self, others, and change. And at any time where you're feeling a bit insecure or a bit insufficient, that you don't have the specialist knowledge to deal with something, maybe what today's talk can offer you as an inspiration is not to stress about it immediately, but think it through a more generic, what might be some of the leadership competencies I can work on, because I believe mastering those basics can probably solve 80% of what you face in the classroom and can actually allow you to have a sustainable development in your professional journey as a teacher. So I'll end my talk here. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at stanley@teachfortaiwan.org. But of course, unfortunately, our website is all in Mandarin. But in the Philippines, there is our partner kind of organization who also operates with the same spirit. Obviously, the educational inequity problem in the Philippines will look very different to Taiwan, but this belief that how we train the next generation of educational leaders via a classroom experience is shared and is very much the core of this network in our fellowship program. So thank you very much again for your attention, and I hope you have gain something that will be beneficial in your journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stanley. And for those who have questions, you can actually check the website of Teach for Taiwan or maybe Teach for the Philippines. And you can also contact Stanley in the email address that he provided. So on behalf of Lumina Foundation and the network of professional researchers and educators, we would like to thank you, Stanley, for your generous time and for sharing your expertise. And with that, we thank you for viewing and taking time to join us in this lightning talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.